All right, guys. So with Bootstrap and forms, there are, as you can guess, more classes that we'll be using. Specifically, the two ones that you guys should be most familiar with because you will be using them most is adding the form control class to either text areas and inputs, and it makes them look like this. It gives it a rounded border and a nice soft border, also some padding. And this is the standard Bootstrap input look and text area. And then the other one is the form group, and this is a way of grouping multiple elements within one form element to achieve different looks. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a little form on our main page. So actually, before we get to forms, we're going to discuss the main part of the page. I'm going to re-indent this to make it proper. There we go. And down here, let's go up to layout and grid. So there's a 12 grid system or 12 column grid layout within Bootstrap, and you can section it up in areas smaller than 12. So anything divisible by 12, you can have 4, 4, and 4, and that's each column gets a column width of 4 so that you can fit 3 inside of it. Now, how we do this is we add a container element around all of the content. So let's go ahead and add a div with a class of container. And this is going to create a centered container with a max width of, I believe, either 1,000 pixels or close to that. So I'm going to save this at this point, put back in our H1, and come over here and resize this. Let me move the browser just like that. And when we refresh, you'll see there's a bit of space on the left, but if I hover over it, you're also going to see space on the right. So it has created a centered layout. Now within this container, we're now going to start adding grid elements. And how we do that is, let me jump down here. You can specify column and then the size of the column you're looking for. Now, with using columns, it's possible to change the breakpoint based on size. So again, with small, medium, and large, abbreviated here, this says that it's a column, and when the page is as big as it can get, which is anything over 1,000 pixels or 992, it's going to have a column width of 2. So if you look up here, you'll see this has a column width of 2. So let's go ahead and create a grid, and it's going to have a sidebar, let's say, or a space for a sidebar that's going to be 4 columns wide, and then a main content area which is going to be the rest of it, so 8 column width. So let's go ahead and add a div here with the class of col medium 4. And in here, let's put an H3 element that says sidebar, just so we can keep track of that. And then underneath that column, we're going to add a div with a class of col medium 8. And main content is going to go here. If I save this and refresh our page, you're going to see that that has not taken effect. I have not added the col keyword there. That's not why it hasn't taken effect. Row. We have not added a row. So a row is a way, as columns are concerned, columns go in rows. And so it's kind of tabular, really. If you've ever heard of or seen a web design from the 90s, you will surely remember the table designs. I remember in 1998, I think I was looking at Squaresoft's website for Final Fantasy VII, and it was all tables. They actually have a Wayback Machine at archive.org. And you can actually find old versions of websites. So if I were to look for Microsoft.com, it would give us a date range that we could go back to. So as you can see here in 1996, there's a website. If I click on that, we can choose a date, let's say October 20th, and then it will load up Microsoft. This was Microsoft's website in 1996, and if you can even inspect it. If you right-click on it and go to inspect, you'll see a lot of table. This is how websites were designed in the 90s. So it was a good grid method, but now we have a better method, and one of the better methods we have is Bootstrap. So if I were to make this smaller and smaller, it's going to stay in this justified column layout down to the medium breakpoint, which is, what is that? Right here, I guess, 200 pixels. Even that, I don't know. Where is this? Let me remove the column here and just use col medium 4 and col medium 8 and save and refresh, and there we get the breakpoints working. So it's 800, 776, or 768. There it is. That's where the breakpoint occurs for the medium keyword and where these both stop being columns. Now we could also specify different properties. So if we wanted at large this to be col, let's say LG 2, and at large we want this one to be col LG 10. So if we save it, we'll see different behaviors based on the size of the page. So this is now large, and you'll see that this column has now gotten smaller to a column width of 2. And if we make it smaller, once it breaks into the medium range, it will separate, and this now becomes 4 columns wide, and this becomes 8. And as we get smaller and smaller, when we go to the small one, it stops being columns altogether. However, you can go ahead and add col SM 6, and then this would also be column small 6. And now if we refresh and keep going down to the, did I get it? One sec. Is this extra small or is that small? Let's have a look. Small. All right. And that's how breakpoints work. You can change the content based on certain screen sizes, and that helps a lot with responsive. And that's what responsiveness is. It's responding to different sizes. So in any regards, in this main content area, let's go ahead and add a form. If we go back to the Bootstrap page here, and go to the forms where we were before, which is under components, we will see the form group we want to add, which is for email addresses. So in here, let's go ahead and create a form. And the form doesn't need any special classes to work. Let's go ahead and create a div with a class of form-group. And this is going to group form elements together to appear as one. So in this instance, we're going to create a label for, and we're going to give the ID of the actual input element. So let's go ahead and label for email input, let's name it. And it's going to say email address. We're going to drop down. Now we're going to create our input. And the input is going to have a class of form-control. And this changes the default Chrome styling of the input to the Bootstrap styling. Type is going to be email. The ID is going to be email input. And there's a new attribute that we're going to be using here as well that Bootstrap has added called area described by. And this tells it that this right here is part of it as well. And I guess it's technically described by it. So let's go ahead and create the ID of that, which will be area-described by, and it's going to be email help in camel case. Let's add a placeholder called email. And then let's end that input, and you can't see it there. All right, so now we go ahead and create a small element with the ID of email help. And this is going to get a class. I'm going to resize this a little bit so you guys can see the background as well. This is going to get a class of form-text, and if you want the text to be softer, you're going to go text-muted. And in here, I'm going to type, this is, and let me drop down here. This is the address of your email. Just in case that wasn't obvious. We're going to save this and refresh the page here. And now we've got this here. This is our email address that we can type in there. So if we wanted to add another form element, we drop down out of this form group, and I'm going to add a label. Rather, we're going to create a new form group with a label for name input, and it's going to say name. Then we create an input here with the class of form-control with an ID of name input and a placeholder of name. And then we end that. I'm going to save this and refresh the page. Now we get a name. So as you can see, it's very easy to create and very quick to create a form in Bootstrap because a lot of the default styling is fine. But now we're just going to make a small override to the form control class to remove the border radius. So right now I'm going to go ahead and open up my swag.css, and I'm going to target form-control. I'm going to say border radius 0 pixels and save it and refresh. And as you can see, now we've got the default Bootstrap style underneath our very own styling for these inputs. And we're going to add one more input, or it's going to be a text area this time, and it's going to just be a place for a message. So I'm going to create a label for message text, and it's going to say message. I'm going to drop down here and create a text area with a class of form-control, a placeholder of message, and an ID of message text. And I'm going to save this and refresh, and now we've got our message area as well. Now, there are two properties for text areas that we haven't talked about yet. One of them is rows, and we can set a default minimum rows to 12, let's say. I'm going to save it and refresh, and there. Now, this is the minimum height, and you can also set, well, that's it actually, just the rows. And you can change the size of that. Now in the next video we're going to be finishing up, well actually there's a lot more to talk about forms actually, so we're going to be finishing up the forms in the next video.